Alrighty. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are on the turtle's back. We're going to get started with part two of our Just Transition webinar series. Today's theme is Keeping It Clean. So after last week's theme of putting the just and just transition, our panelists laid a really great framework for how we approach a just transition. And today we're going to get more into the details on people who are leading renewable energy projects. So before we get into the meat, so to speak, of the webinar, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So first and foremost, we are recording this webinar, and it will be available on our YouTube channel and our social media in the coming days. Just letting everyone who's watching know that you can feel free to use the Q&A, and that there will be a Q&A portion later at the end of the webinar. And we're also really pleased to have ASL interpretation provided by communities of color operating in allyship, COCOA. Our ASL interpreters today lending their time are Hercules and Kat. And thank you to our interpreters, and just a reminder that disability justice is climate justice. So my name, for everyone watching, my name is Carol Montour. I am Mohawk Wolf Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. I am the Climate Leadership Coordinator here at Indigenous Climate Action. I work for our education and training team, and part of what we do is highlight just transition and renewable energy projects and climate solutions. So we have some really great panelists here today who are going to talk about leading the just transition, their work, and we're going to have we have an hour and a half today, so we're going to do some questions that we have arranged, and then we'll have time for some Q&A. So I'm really excited for this session. We have some really amazing panelists, and I'm going to pass off to our first panelist, who's my really good friend and relative, Serena Mendizabal. And Serena will pass off to the other panelists to introduce themselves before we get into the first question. And just a reminder to our panelists and to myself, for the interpreters, to try to speak at a nice leisurely pace to allow them to keep pace with us. And I'll pass to Serena.
Nyago Carol, Nyago for this partnership with Indigenous Climate Action. Scano, everyone here, and thank you all for attending today. My name is Serena Mendizabal, but I'm just going to introduce myself quickly in the language first. So, Serena Nigauso, Gaikono Nyakwenzoda, Ochinigishaute. So, hi everyone. My name is Serena, as I mentioned. I am Cayuga Wolf Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. So you have two wolf clans on this call today, so it might get a little spicy. And yeah, I'm the interim managing director at Sacred Earth Solar, which is one of the lead organizations on the Just Transition Guide. And I'm very excited to be here today and to talk Just Transition, because I honestly feel like I eat, sleep, breathe Just Transition in my work. And it's pretty much what I dedicate my life, even some of my hobbies to, which is really interesting. So yeah, just quickly, I come from Six Nations. We are the most populous community in the country, and we also have the largest clean energy portfolio out of any community in the country, which sounds really exciting. But about 8 years ago, I was given the opportunity to get exposure to working in the clean energy field in Six Nations, and what I found as a young Indigenous Ungwehwe woman within this field is there's still a lot of gaps. And to come from a community, privileged to come from a community in the transition, when we have other communities who are still facing lots of extraction, such as where Sacred Earth Solar's roots are, I find it's my obligation to create a just transition, to really put the just in the just transition and exemplify what that actually means within the embodiment of all the work I do. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I will pass it over to Aubrey, which yeah, I'm really excited to hear Aubrey, because I work really closely with Indigenous Clean Energy. And yeah, so thank you, and I can't wait to talk more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Serena, for passing it over. My name is Aubrey Ann La Liberty Puapisconius. My pronouns are she, her. I'm very, very happy to be joining you folks today. I'm from Canoe Lake Cree First Nation in Treaty 10 territory and Little Pine First Nation in Treaty 6 territory. So I always make jokes to people that I'm very Cree through and through, my mom and my dad's side. And I'm honestly really, really proud of that because I come from a lot of really beautiful teachings, like growing up with my mushum and growing up in around my community and with my family. And I always like tell the story of how I would like kick rocks and how my dad would tell me not to do that because they're our grandfathers. And so I think being able to show the way that we connect to the land and that we connect to Mother Earth and the waters and other living relatives is in itself a way of showing how we can lead in spaces like this and how energy and the leadership Indigenous folks have in that space already uh, is really embedded in, you know, who we are as a people when it comes to, you know, choosing a lifestyle that's better for the world around us. And so I can definitely attest that Serena eats, breathes, and sleeps the just transition after working with her. She's part of our imagination program. I'm the imagination program manager at Indigenous Clean Energy, a role I'm very proud to be able to hold to get to work with Indigenous youth across the country who are building clean energy projects in their communities. So I've seen firsthand the Indigenous youth leadership that takes place in this space, and I'm really excited to speak to that a little bit more today and really tell you folks more about it because if you, as you know, or if you don't know, Indigenous peoples are quite humble peoples, and so you don't often get to hear about that side of the successes that are taking place in community and the work that young people are doing as much as you'd like because they're doing it for their people. They're not doing it for recognition per se. And so I'm excited to get to highlight the leadership that takes place much beyond the great folks on this panel and all the folks that we have in our circles. So I'll pass it over to the next panelist to introduce themselves.
Yos Madam Kuksensla Nuskamata. Yadisino. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nuskamata. I'm from the Newhalk Nation and the Secwepemc Nation, and I'm here in my homelands of Newhalkolimk. My background has been in all different kinds of community organizing. That includes over a decade of work of community advocacy against mining. I've worked in my homelands against mining exploration, educating, and direct action on different aspects of protecting the land, which are all integrated. So today I'd like to share a bit of the work that we're doing here in Newhalk Nation and how we're connected in through our coastal bloodlines, our trade networks, and through the watersheds that we are neighbors with many others. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of our panelists. And we're going to get into the first question. And I'm going to direct this one specifically to Aubrey, speaking about Indigenous youth leadership. And so just wondering if you could talk about how Indigenous youth are actually leading this just transition movement and some advice you have to anyone who'd like to get involved.
Absolutely. It's so hard to like just pick certain projects to like speak to because there's so many that are taking place across the country. And just across the world, even we've seen at Indigenous Clean Energy, we have a global hub and a national hub, and they really get to see the work that folks are doing all over the world. And a lot of it is led by young people. And a lot of the times when I get the opportunity to go into community or go to conferences, it's always folks of older generations that are always like, you know, the youth keep calling me out or the youth keep telling me that I need to do this or that I need to implement this. And I think just the recognition that a lot of these folks are showing for the leadership and the advocacy work that Indigenous youth do, whether they're directly involved in clean energy projects or not, is you know, really prevalent when you walk into those spaces. And so for us at Indigenous Clean Energy, we have two programs that are in our youth programming sphere, and one of them is Imagination. I always say I'm biased because I get to be the program manager in that one, but I'm not too biased because I also am a graduate of our other program, which is our Generation Power program. But basically, just to show you folks a little bit with Imagination first, is Imagination is a partnership between 7Gen Council, Student Energy, and Indigenous Clean Energy. And it's housed under the Indigenous Clean Energy team to kind of run the program. And so what we get to do is we work with teams of Indigenous youth that are wanting to build smaller scale clean energy projects in their communities. And so what we often see come out of this program is, net zero greenhouses. We see capacity building initiatives. We see EV feasibility studies taking place. We see folks who are trying to get their culture camps powered by renewable energy so that they can continue operating no matter what their community comes by. And so it's a really beautiful program where we get to, youth get up to $50,000 in project funding. They receive mentorship, capacity building initiatives. We give them a phased project management approach. And, getting to be part of the team that helps lead that program, I've really seen that for us, like the youth lead our team. And so for me being the manager, I am an Indigenous youth myself. And so I learn so much from the youth every day, and they make me laugh and they call me out when I'm wrong, and I can't appreciate them enough. Like they do so much within their spaces, and you can just see the passion that they have. And so a lot of them, what we're seeing is that they're recognizing that, energy is just part of the solution of what we're trying to create in the world to become more sustainable. It's not the solution. And so they're also recognizing that there's capacity building gaps before other people recognize that. And they're going in and they're trying to do education. They're working with the youth that even are younger than 18 and trying to get them hands-on and learning about clean energy. We're watching them do communications that are like fun and exciting and utilize humor in our way. And so we're seeing them do the just transition in a way that's, creating energy projects, but in a way that's also making it exciting and accessible to folks. And so it's so impactful when we watch them, go into these spaces because they're really utilizing the community that they have and the energy and the passion that they have for this space to mobilize real action and get more people involved. And what we often see from them is that they don't want to be the only people leading in this space. They want to just create every person in their community, give them the opportunity to be leaders in the space as well. And so Indigenous youth have been instrumental in the just transition and will continue to do so. And often what we see in energy projects is they take years to negotiate, they take years to come to fruition. And if we're not engaging young people at the start of those projects, they're not going to be there when it comes time for development. And so what we're going to see because of that is we're going to see that youth are not being utilized, and that youth will go out on their own. That's the one thing, is they have, ambition and power and strength, and they're not scared to use their voices. And so to youth that want to get involved, I'd say just find your community. When I was in Generation Power, I had the opportunity to meet really amazing folks in the space as well. And I was brand new to energy. And you don't have to be an expert on the technical side of energy. You don't have to be an engineer or, have a degree in mathematics. What you need is just the passion and the desire to help your community. And when you find like-minded individuals through programming or through ICE networks or through 7Gen Council or Indigenous Climate Action, you find people who are going to help you find the space that you fit into this just transition, because we need people everywhere. We don't just need engineers, we also need educators. We need folks in the trades. We need folks who are working in communications. There's a space for everyone in the just transition, and every job is going to be a green job. And so just find your people, and then those people will lift you up and find you and put you in the right spaces. And so that's what we try to do with our programming at Indigenous Clean Energy. And I think Indigenous youth on their own do that as well. They're brilliant at lifting up their community. And so I think if we just keep doing that as a people and remember that it's us working towards a common goal. It's not us against each other. I think we're gonna continue to create really beautiful and meaningful impact.
Thank you, Aubrey. I really love that point you said on the youth leading your team, and just like the points on humor as well, like just that using that aspect. I think that's something that we really do well in our communities. And just, I also love the point, I made a note of it, of you don't need to be an expert to be involved in this, and you just have to have that passion and that desire. So thank you again. And I'm going to pass off to Serena to build on a little bit of what Aubrey was saying about some of those notes on capacity building. And Serena, if you could talk a little bit about why capacity building in communities is so critical to renewable energy projects as a whole, but also the broader just transition movement.
Amazing. Thank you. So in my own philosophy around the just transition and my own philosophy around implementing projects, to build capacity within our people is to build energy sovereign communities. And I felt like I saw this a lot within my own community of Six Nations when I worked. And so I've been in clean energy for about 8 years at this point. And I didn't necessarily feel like that capacity was extending. And I think that's being reflected within the projects and within the community as a whole when it comes to decision making. And so with that being said, I really wanted to touch on today something that I've been thinking about for a while, that extends from my own experiences within my community and then my experiences at Sacred Earth Solar, is this difference between First Nations owned and community led projects. And so First Nations owned projects, First Nations ownership is this hot topic right now. It is a buzzword. It's really exciting. Let's get some equity ownership. Six Nations in our 18 renewable energy projects, solar and wind assets, not one is 100% equity ownership. So right now we have a lot of extractive companies, developers coming into our communities because they know Six Nations has an extremely large land base. They know we are a populous community and they know we're right into economic development. If you ever come make a trip down to Six Nations, you'll probably see that. And it's being reflected though when I was working there, and even to this day, and it can get me right heated sometimes, but these First Nations owned projects aren't being reflected in our people. They aren't being reflected through the decision-making processes that are inherent to who we are as Haudenosaunee people. And for example, like just, I don't know, a few months ago, we have this big 250 megawatt energy storage project coming into our community on our territory. And honestly, a lot of people in the renewables field are really excited about it because there's never been one this big, especially with Indigenous partnerships. But come to my community and ask them how they feel about it. And so that right there, I think just proves everything around this First Nations ownership, because we have developers coming into our communities and we have, I wouldn't say illegal, but maybe illegal structures in place, such as band councils and such as development corporations of within our own community, structures that are not ours, be implementing these projects. And every community is different. So I'm just speaking from my own community experience. That's one thing. And every community has their own way of how they're trying to achieve liberation and how they're trying to achieve the transition. I think that's also something to share. So if development corporations work for you, then go for it, because that's what works for you. Your community has a self-determination to pick the processes and the structures that you would like. But for me, in Six Nations, that doesn't work for us. When we have a hereditary system that has been around since time immemorial, that has been around since the Guyana-Lagoa and the Great Law of Peace. And so, yeah, this large project, and this isn't just the first project that's happened, because I was on a community engagement task force for the band to just try and get their processes better and better. And there, out of 18 projects, only 2 of them met the international standards of community engagement. And those 2 of them were referendum and they were declined. And so I think that just goes to show what happens when you actually do achieve full community engagement and when we actually do have our voices included, is is within this context. And so when it comes back to capacity building, we really need to think about how are we actually creating community-led projects from the ground up that are coming from your decision making, that are coming from the youth, that are coming from the actual people in the community who had an idea. I want to make a difference. I want to be a change maker. I want my community to be healthy. I want my community to be sovereign. I want my community to be well. And so this is where community-led projects come in, and this is where Sacred Earth comes in, is really utilizing capacity building frame within our project frameworks to build self-sufficiency so that we can actually operate, install, maintain our own systems, that we have our own people working on the systems, that we know every context of the project from start to finish, instead of just investing in a certain portion and having our logo on it, right? That isn't what I want to see. And that to me isn't a just transition. And this is where Sacred Earth Solar, our projects, we focus on that capacity building. So every community that we work with actually is invested into as well with education and training. And just for an example with this, the Six Nations project that I'm doing, people from our longhouse, our ceremonial longhouse that upholds our hereditary systems, we had over 10 people trained in solar design and installation, as well as operations and maintenance. And we also had this capacity into the decision making to understand the full process of being able to implement a solar PV project. And from start to finish, they have been involved. And this has been coming from what the people want. And I think that's something we really need to extend past like community benefit agreements, is really seeing what actually are the community needs, and not saying this is what we can offer you. No, us actually extending, no, this is what we need and this is what we want and this is how we're going to do it. So I just think capacity building is really important, and it needs to come from the ground up. And that's why seeing like a lot of the work around the country with like community energy champions is so important, because they're the ones who are bringing this vision to life. They're the ones who are collecting and gathering our voices within our communities to be able to extend these projects as an extension of who they are. And so that's where we don't have the same visions when developers come into our communities. We don't have the same love and care for the project. But when we build it ourselves and it's our idea and it's for the self-determination and wellness of our people, that's where we really make a difference. And that's why we need to build as much capacity in our communities, in our people, through trainings, education, mentorship, exactly like what Aubrey is doing, what Indigenous Climate Action doing, what is Sacred Earth Solar. Many programs and many amazing people are building that capacity. And it's so amazing because in just 10 years ago, this wasn't necessarily happening. Yeah, I'm really grateful. And honestly, that's where the Just Transition Guide, to just end on this note, that's where the Just Transition Guide came from. There has been no public comprehensive guide to implementing projects and implementing solutions. And many people who have already been leading the charge have had to learn by trial and error. So how now do we have the resources for those who have been working within this field to extend that to our other communities and to really provide that capacity so that we can all see just transition in our communities? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Serena. I always get so fired up listening to you talk, and I can attest to the fact that she does eat, sleep, live, breathe, just transition and building capacity within our community. And we're so grateful for that. And I just love the point you made on these projects need to be meeting communities' needs, guided by leadership, governance, and that looks different in different communities, right? And so I'm going to pass off to Nuskamata now to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the most effective ways to involve Indigenous communities in the planning and implementation of these projects.
Great, thank you. I'll just give some examples of what we're doing in our community here in New Hawk Nation. So we're on the West Coast and we live in the coastal temperate rainforest, and our situation is very different than others where solar isn't necessarily the best solution for us. And we're looking at run-of-river project for passive energy systems. We're looking at protecting our vast forests as a way to combat climate change and to keep our local ecosystem intact. So we run off of glaciers and our salmon rivers and our inlets. And so looking at our specific location and the work that's happening in our community, it's more hands-on and learn as you go. So yesterday we were cutting fish for our food security with our food security team, and it was in conjunction with a funeral. At the same time, it lined up at the same time. And so, of course, a big portion of that fish went to the family, and we were cutting red snapper. And red snapper grows very slowly, and we had some big red snapper in the tub. And it was the first time for me to cut it. And we were talking with the knowledge keepers and the fishermen that were there. And they said, you know, this one here is about 250 years old, this red snapper. And my first thought was, that's older than the country of Canada. That's older than the first time that the Umsihwa of white people came to our homelands. And it's really important for us to know that about this fish and to be eating this fish and connecting with the time of our ancestors being in full strength and our civilization here being, you know, very complex, and that we were eating all of our foods and harvesting all of our foods in our gardens that they call the wilderness. You know, we have a very different relationship with where we live, with how we live with the land, and knowing how to read the land and the changes. Things have shifted with climate change, with things being warmer and drier in the rainforest. So we're experiencing a lot of changes in terms of how much salmon are returning, and keeping an eye on that, because that's our real economy. That's our energy source for life. And so when we're building, so for example, in our home village, we have started to build, to rebuild our village. And this is on so-called Crown land. It's our home village, and we actually just received a trespass notice from the province of British Columbia, claiming that we're on the King's land and that we're building in a British Columbia heritage site, which is our ancient village, which is thousands of years old. And we have a direct bloodline connection to that village and responsibility to care for that place. So that's what we're doing. And the work that we're doing inherently has to educate about where we are and who we are and why we're there and why we're doing it, and what that deeper connection to the land, to the rivers, to the glaciers, to the mountaintops, to our inlets, all of that is connected in terms of energy and life force, and our role within it, and pushing back on these colonial systems to re-engage with our responsibilities, like cleaning the river at low water in February and March. That's an important part of our role with the salmon on our river. So when we're thinking about capacity building, we are hands-on, learning about our salmon systems and the stock numbers. We're learning about how much logging is going on and how that's impacting estuaries. We are building in our villages. We are connecting that with our language and what our language teaches us about the land, what our language teaches us about our governance, what our Indigenous names teach us about who we are from, where we are from, and why we were given that name. My name, Nus-Kamada, means place of moose, and it connects me to the upper valley. So anybody who speaks our language will know directly where I'm from. They'll be like, oh, she's from one of the old villages in Nuxalk. And so all of these systems are being integrated in our learning and what we're bringing, not only young people in, but anybody who wants to learn. So yesterday when we were cutting these ancient red snapper fish, we had elders show up, we had youth and children show up, having these conversations in an intergenerational way, which is really important to ground ourselves, because we have generations there who attended residential schools. I'm the first generation in my family who didn't attend, so I'm the in-between. And, you know, people younger than me who have never experienced that and don't see the direct impacts of, you know, those schools in terms of like really obvious ways. We're all experiencing them just in terms of colonization, but you know, where there's a hesitancy by some leaders to do things, it's because of the lived experience of being arrested, of having their boats seized, of being beaten in jail, you know, all these things that we experience, all of this oppressive tactics, this is all for the same reason it was in the beginning, was for our land, right? For the wealth of our lands. And yesterday we had a tub full of halibut, red snapper, and black cod. And we were saying, this is the real wealth. This is why we're here. This is why we're doing the work. And this is why we have children coming to learn and to touch it and to feel it and to normalize that this is important. And this is what we're here to protect for these young ones. So in terms of capacity building, it's really hands-on, really integrated with different, with health and wellness, with our energy team, and with our governance team, with our hereditary chiefs and our elected leaders, are all working in collaboration to make our village healthier and more educated and more prepared to take over our lands again. After colonization, we were reduced to 1% of our population. We're now at about 50% and things are shifting. So we're preparing and building and clearing a path for our children. And that's part of our teaching. So we work that into our work as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm a little bit blown away by your comments and just everything that you said in such a short amount of time. So thank you for that. And I think I got goosebumps when you were talking about these, you know, our lifeways being older than Canada, being older than contact, and just all of the points on the healing aspect and intergenerational, you know, transference of knowledge, and the point on within your community, a lot of certain renewables won't work and it has to be place-based. And so I think there was so many important points that you made, and just thank you again. And I'm going to pass off next to Serena to talk a little bit about, and you kind of got into this in your initial question, but more specifically on what makes the projects that Sacred Earth is involved with different than other sort of mainstream projects, and specifically if you'd like to talk about the project that you're currently leading at Sour Springs Longhouse.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know who Sacred Earth Solar, you probably see our logo here as one of the lead organizations for the Just Transition Guide. But Sacred Earth Solar, we're an Indigenous women, Two-Spirit-led grassroots organization that supports Indigenous communities with climate solutions and healing justice. So we specifically focus on climate infrastructure, small scale, as well as education and training, specifically for the communities we're working with in infrastructure, but we'll be extending, if you heard Farron in the last webinar, as well as advocacy and policy, honestly, where the roots of Sacred Earth comes from, and healing justice, really internally focusing on that. And so that's what I get to do in my day job, which is honestly a pretty rad day job. So I'm pretty grateful to be able to talk land back and renewables and get paid for it. But yeah, Sacred Earth, just for the context of like origins, really came out of tar sands extraction. And Melina, who you met last week, her community being inundated, and same with IC, I know the roots are also within that, of like this inundation of tar sands extraction and fossil fuels, and wanting to see like what's the alternative. And so that's really where like this came out of this environmental protection and wanting to do one of the first solar projects within northern Alberta, specifically around tar sands extraction. And it was really trying to, they call it Patapan, coming of a new dawn, right? And that really is what the project embodied, was coming of a new dawn for their people. And so that the younger generations and the coming faces, they would get to see something different, and they would be able to reimagine a world different, and maybe a world that used to be like the way we lived before. And with that, from this one community project, it kind of trickled down and really focused on the land back movement, which is why I even came into this job, because the roots there are necessary for a just transition. Land back, we need land back for a just transition. And there is no just transition without land back, without those who are sacrificing their time with their family and their loved ones and their lives on the front line. To me, that is a just transition. And so for Sacred Earth, how can we sustain those movements of land back so that we can prolong and delay and stop emissions, as well as the environmental degradation of our territories? And so, yeah, we really focused on building projects to sustain land back movements across so-called Canada, tiny house warriors blocking Trans Mountain Pipeline, with the Wet'suwet'en blocking Coastal GasLink, Fairy Creek blockade, as well as furthering into like language revitalization and culture. So that's where a lot of our projects came into a lot of the people in our communities who are doing that frontline work, frontline of land protection, frontline of language revitalization, frontline of ceremonial obligations or cultural resurgence. And with each project, it is intentional, it is relational, and it is personal. And I think that's really different of how we come into our projects, because it's not just us trying to find any which way to be able to insert ourselves with communities. We want communities to come to us, to trust us, and to know we're there to be a resource for them. And so very different than what I've seen in the renewables world around the intentions and the relationality that we uphold within our project space. We specifically focus on small scale projects. We are not based on revenue generation, but instead on community self-determination, healing, and community building. And so I think that's really different when we see, and even in my own experience of like looking at utility scale. And I do believe like wanting to actually scale the whole grid um, to a more lower carbon future. I do believe in that, but I also feel like it needs to be done in the right way. And I feel like at Sacred Earth Solar, we take our time and we do it with care. And that's why it may not look like a 100 megawatt solar farm, but the smiles and the love that I see after a project, I don't know if we get that when we put in these big solar farms all the time, or these big hydroelectric dams, and it's because our projects are community led. And it comes back to that again. And through Sacred Earth Solar, we prioritize and we embody community governance and decision-making processes in our work that are focused on place-based. So they're focused on the partnerships that we're making. We actually don't have those models, a pan-Indigenous model to go to different communities. We utilize their decision-making models within their specific communities. And we put that within the fabric of our work. And so just for example, and we're working on our 8th and 9th project right now, which is really exciting. And specifically this project is really exciting because it is personal for me. And there's a lot of love and care that comes for me. And it's with Sour Springs Longhouse and Six Nations and Upper Cayuga Nation, one of the longest running longhouses on the Six Nations territory, and we'll be implementing a multi-phase project with energy efficiency retrofits, a hybrid solar PV system, and seed storage facility. So really focusing also on like Haudenosaunee agriculture culture. And for me, we are taking within our clan system, we are taking our clan system decision-making models of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and of the Sour Springs Longhouse, and that is what is governing this project at Sacred Earth. And to me, that is a just transition. And that stems back to our roots with land back. The Confederacy in 2021 put out a moratorium on development that said no development or no development on the territory can come without the consent of our Confederacy and our people. And I'm actually part of that. That means me, that means Carol, that means us within this framework of our voices being included within this clan system. And so I think that's really powerful because this is one of the first projects that I've seen to be able to enact our hereditary governance within the decision-making, within the leadership of renewables, and even in Six Nations. This looks completely different than the transition we're seeing. And that's why I want to do it. I want to challenge the status quo. And that is what Sacred Earth does. We challenge the status quo. We take a climate justice framework and we implement it within the energy transition, as well as food security, but we're starting to dabble into that way. And we're really taking the notion that we cannot replicate the same inequities that we have seen with fossil fuel production through the implementation of renewables. And I know this is something to say because I know renewables aren't perfect. And at Sacred Earth, we know that. But we also provide it as the chance for the community to self-determine what they want to see in their communities. And if they want solar, then they want solar. If they want batteries because they're off grid and this is the most stable energy, they have the self-determining right to make those decisions. And we support that. Knowing also at Sacred Earth, we know the nuances with mining. And this is something we also want to be prioritizing within our transition work of how can we actually reimagine a world within this just transition where communities aren't being impacted, because right now it feels like we're going fossil fuel impacted communities to mining impacted communities. And Sacred Earth is reflecting on this within our work. But we really come down. Someone asked us one day, we were doing a job interview, and they asked us a question. They said, "What's the one word that comes to mind when you guys do your projects?" And we looked at each other and we said, self-determination and health and well-being. And to me, that is the fabric of who we are at Sacred Earth. That is why we do these projects. It's not just about lowering GHG emissions. It's not about getting as much revenue as possible, even though some is good for communities, and I get that. It's about community, healing, and self-determination. And yeah, I'm really grateful that's the type of world and that's the type of work I get to do every day. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Serena. I'm feeling a little choked up listening to that. So thank you so much for that. And I was trying to take notes on things to kind of cap off what you're saying, but I think there was just so many points there on the self-determination and the health and well-being, but also that love and community care. And also the point earlier, what you said on there's no transition without land back. And so I think just so many important things that you shared. And thank you for that. And thank you for your work. We're grateful to have you in our community and on this panel. And my next question I'm going to direct to Aubrey. And you mentioned your work as program manager with Imagination. And you're working with youth in communities. And so, based on that and just your observations, what are some of the best ways that we can ensure that the voices of the most marginalized within our communities are heard and addressed in projects and in the broader Just Transition movement?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think, yeah, one of the things that I often hear in my work, and one of the things that I actually, while I was working on my master's project, I had the opportunity to go to Lac La Ronge Indian Band and do some work with their community energy team. And one of the things that who's now a good friend of mine, Desiree, said to me is that our communities keep saying we're tired of being studied. And one of the things, like when she said that, I just was like, you're so right. Like I couldn't get over the fact that like what she said was like, we are tired of being studied, and our communities do recognize that folks come in and they act like they're hearing our voices out, and they act like they're trying to do good work and research that's going to benefit us. But what they often do is they come in, they extract this knowledge, they try to, they really put us through like a lot of emotional endeavors to, really share about what we faced as people when it comes to energy, when it comes to our housing, when it comes to what we have access to, and then they leave and we never hear anything about it. And so we are tired of being studied, and we're tired of being studied in a way that, it's like performative. It's a way for them to advance research, and it's not necessarily always a way that our community can utilize that data or utilize that information in a way that's going to actually go back to our communities and allow us to utilize that information. And so I think one of the ways that we do that is that we start by coming at it from a place of respect and love, and knowing that, the knowledge that these folks from Indigenous communities shares, like knowledge that extends beyond what you would get in a Western formal educational institution. What these folks have in communities from their lived experiences and from their teachings and the way they've grown up goes much beyond that. And they're brilliant, and they're masters in their own ways. And we need to start going into communities recognizing that when we speak to people and when we're trying to get information, and make sure that we give data back and make sure that we return that, because that's the way that these voices that we always say we need to include, while they're included, they're not included always in the right way, and they're not included in a way that's showing the utmost respect to these folks. And one day these people aren't going to want to share their voices anymore. They're not going to want to give that data to you folks. And that's where we're going to really hit roadblocks, because we're going to not be able to work together at all. And so instead of seeing further gaps come into play, we need to address and recognize that right off the bat. And so part of that is, allowing these people into these spaces, giving them a platform to share their voice, and recognizing that the age, the formal education that people have, that's the stuff that we don't have to pay attention to. It's the stuff that, we need to see the folks who are on the front lines, the folks who are defending, the folks who are doing meaningful work. And as my other fellow co-panelists said, is we need to not forget about our land defenders and our water protectors too, and what they face in these spaces, because it's I spoke at a human resources event actually once, and it was really a random space for me to be in, but I was talking about how we can't X people out of recruitment processes if they have a record for being a land defender or for being a water protector and were arrested on those front lines, because it's often like that we're put in a space as Indigenous people where we have to choose between our rights and who we are as a people and our values and protecting our community, and then choosing between that and between succeeding in this like Western way of what they see as a powerful person. And we shouldn't be put in that place where we have to choose between one or the other. We have to recognize that the folks that are doing that are so powerful in their own way, and that Indigenous people shouldn't have to make that choice between the two, that we should be able to walk in this world in a way that values and honors who we are, and the way that we are connected to the lands, because the whole reason we're in the situation that we're in is because of greed and because of this capitalistic way of living, and that we need to continue to be outperforming one another, and we're not living in harmony with the world around us. And so the voices of Indigenous peoples and communities is where that's going to come from. You go into communities and spaces and you see that when we're, working with, when we're with animals, and when we're in our hunting season or in our ceremonies, we recognize every aspect that comes into play in those spaces. And so you'll see that when we do this, we need to do it in a way that's mindful of the practices of Indigenous people too. One of the things that I think a lot of people have had a difficulty with is when I was working my master's project, they're like, we have to go into community right now. Like, we have this deadline, but it was the time of a culture camp in this community. And so I was like, there's no way that we're going to go in when they're taking the week that they get as a community to go into this culture camp and take away from that. And so it's a way, when we're talking about inclusion, we have to go into inclusion in the way that, our traditions and our ways of life come before needing this information. And then when we get this information, it goes back to the people, it's treated with respect. And that folks have the decision-making power, because when you come to conclusions with this data, then that's kind of where, folks like you have your own biases and your own things that come out of that information that you're extracting from communities, and it's not often talked to with the community. And so to get to that endpoint, it comes to, having a consensus with folks and speaking with elders and with youth and with folks. And so recognizing that portion, and also knowing, like I spoke about earlier, is that humility. People aren't always going to talk about their successes, and we need to create space where that's available as well. I see that there's a question there about a culture camp. I guess, see, sometimes I'm even speaking about things that I'm not realizing that not everyone would know what that is. A culture camp in my community, in my areas, a lot of it's a time for us to get to go back and have community members take part in like our ways. And so that means hunting, it means fishing, it means taking part in ceremony. It means allowing people to learn the language or speak the language. It's hide tanning. It's making ribbon skirts. It's really beautiful. And it's a way for us to kind of be able to disconnect from the world that we often see ourselves in and go back to our ways. And it's really amazing, because if anyone's ever been to one or heard of one or seen folks go to it, I think you'll recognize that you come back like a different person from it after. Like you feel yourself back. You know how people make the joke about how, oh, I need to go touch grass for a little bit, or if you haven't heard that, in the wintertime, I'm often like, oh, I can't wait for summer. I can't wait for the next culture camp. And it's because like it's a really beautiful way for us to go back. But yeah, to get to equity and get to inclusion, it's to recognize the space that people are at, I think. And we released a report this year as Indigenous Clean Energy on Indigenous healthy energy homes. And that just goes to show that there's amazing people. I see Serena. It's a great report that we had really incredible people on the ICE team work on with Canadian Climate Institute. And it just goes to show that like when we're working on these initiatives, we have to, like, especially when it comes to energy efficiency, we have to recognize that people often talk about energy efficiency in a way that's like, oh, let's upgrade these homes, but they're not often recognizing that in Indigenous communities, the retrofitting process and getting to that space requires a lot more work because the homes are already yes, Jana Whale is amazing too, one of my best friends. Shout out to her. But it's one of the ways, or our homes are already built at a place where they're breaking down much faster than homes are in, you know, municipal areas. And so it's not just about little retrofits or upgrades. It's often about like fully breaking down a place and seeing how we can work on that. And so it's giving folks the ability to kind of take pride in where they're living and include them in that. I know there's another question about community involvement that we'll get into, but yeah, I think basically at the end of the day, like equity inclusion, it comes from so many places, but the main thing is that we need to come from a place of respect and that understanding that us as humans is what comes first. And that with our knowledges and our understandings as Indigenous people, like there's no other way out of the situation that we're in than to allow Indigenous peoples to lead in this space with the teachings and the history that we have. And the fact that we still have culture camps that we even just had a conversation on. My cat's crying in the back if you can hear it. Even she's passionate about this work. But it just goes to show that we're really like, we really like, because we go back to the spaces where we come from so much, and because we take the time to reconnect, we really are the people whose voices should be heard, but that can't be taken advantage of either.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. I think you touched on so many amazing things, and so did your cat in the background. But I think that piece on respect is so central, and I think everybody on this panel has talked about that. You know, those fundamentals of respect and community care and love and healing are so important to this movement. And I love that the conversation kind of also went into the realm of culture camps. And I think this is a really great segue into our next question that I'm going to direct to Nuskamata. About cultural preservation and what is the role of like how can this just transition, how can these renewable energy projects help support the preservation and revitalization of our cultures and our languages? I think even with, I loved what you said about your name is place-based, and so like even when someone hears your name, they're placing you in relationship with your land and your ancestors. So if you could talk a little bit more about that.
It's a big question. I'm sorry, could you repeat the last piece? I feel like there's a few parts in there.
Yeah, it is a very loaded question, but just how can a just transition support the revitalization and preservation of our cultures and languages?
Yeah, I think for me, the way that I think about it, like there's a lot of different language depending you know, which sector you're working in, but really what it is about for us here in Nucleacalimp, what we talk about here is that it's really about getting back to who we are and practicing that on a daily basis. So it's being free to be within our lands without fear of being criminalized, about harvesting our own food that's in healthy supply, about having clean water, having a say of what happens in our mountains, which are the basis for so much of our culture. This was where our first ancestors came to our homelands through the stories, our first stories of our ancestors. You know, when we're talking about preservation, I think that to me, preservation of culture is about long-term intergenerational protection of the lands and waters. And when you're talking about revitalization, it's about actually getting out into the real world and doing the things. You know, it's for us, it's the figuring out ways to fish the inlets when we are dealing with systemic poverty and we don't have $250,000 boats to go fish on the waters, and figuring out ways to work with different programs that have some funding, like how could we work in collaboration with them? How can we think outside of these systems that have been put on us? So I know there's a lot of messiness when it comes to working with colonial systems like the band office. So the way it was described to me by an elder is that these systems have been put in place and we're dealing with them because we're working under duress. And there still are people working in there. There still are people that have been put their lives towards working for our people. So here in our community, our band council has made an agreement with our hereditary chiefs, our hereditary system, to work in collaboration, and that the band council supports the sovereignty of our hereditary system, and that the band council is there to support with programs and dollars and funding, and is able to receive money from foundations on behalf of the sovereignty work that's happening. And in the case where we're building and land backing in our village, we're just returning home. But this is a very loaded political act because we are directly challenging the crown. And so all of these things come together because these are our lives. These are our daily lives. It's not a program. It's not a, I actually hate that word, actually program. It's just so colonial. It's like, these are our life ways. These are our pathways. So let's start like living them. Like, we have guardians in our nation. It's not a guardian program. So if one thing that people could take away from me is, please stop calling everything a program. These are our ways of life. This is our governance. This is who we are. So we have to stop using that colonial language in those ways and start using our own words and our own language and start making that normal. We're putting up signs in our language. We're blocking off access to the river where our villages are and saying, this is reserved for us. This is now a protected area. This is where I am now is Snookach. We get rid of the English names and we always put that on our posters and our invites. We use our Newfolk names all the time. As soon as I learn somebody's traditional name, I use that over and over because our languages and our names are ancient and they connect us to our homelands. And it's really important that we acknowledge that and use that and be accountable to our names. So that's why I always go by Nuskamata, because I mean, I'm also known as Jacinda Mack. That's the name that my mother gave me. I haven't rejected that name, but I think it's really important for us to use our names that we've received in ceremony to help validate that, and for those names to work on us and to hold us accountable, that it represents all the Nuskamatas before me intergenerationally for thousands of years, and I am the current version holding that name. And so I'm also adding to that name in the work that I do, and that I'm responsible to that name and my family and my village and my nation and my descendants. So all of those things we learn from our language, and I think it's really important that even if you know one word, use it every day. Use it every day. And if you learned one word a week, you'd have 52 words. Within 2 years, you would have enough language to be starting to speak in sentences. So it's not impossible. I think we have to reject colonial language and colonial ideals around we're inferior. Like, my people were reduced to 1% and our language is still alive, and we still know which villages we come from, and we still carry our names, and we still are protecting our lands. And that, I see that across North and South America, around the world, right? I see that resilience because we are still connected to our lands, because we still have that direct connection. We carry that responsibility. We carry that bloodline. My body is built from salmon and glacier water and the forests here that nourish us. So we have to remember that connection in the work we do, that's what strengthens us. Our names strengthen us, who we are, and embodying that with pride. Like, I see that in the younger generations, and it's so awesome. The work that I do is to clear a path for everybody that's, younger than me, basically. And that's built into my name too. And so I embody that work. And sometimes I say, like, it's pretty messy bushwhacking and clearing trail. And that's, what I feel like I'm doing sometimes. But that's the work that I'm here to do. And that name was put on me by my ancestors, by my grandmother. And so that's what's working through me. And it's not about me, but it's through me as a vessel of an expression of this land. So hopefully that answered your question, constituents. Thank you.
That more than answered my question, and thank you so much for all of what you said. I was again blown away, and that point again on just these being our responsibilities. We have responsibilities to our lands, to our ancestors, to our future generations. And I think I love the point on what you said about guardians and programs. That's something that has also kind of irked me. And I think even just with this term just transition, I use it, it is a useful term, but I think so much of these movements that we're in are terms that are our lifeways, like you said. And a lot of our original lifeways have been co-opted now into these movement terms. Our people have always practiced regenerative agriculture, permaculture. We were always low carbon, zero waste. We were the original climate leaders. And I think so much of this movement work is us getting back in touch with those responsibilities. So thank you so much for what you said. And I will be revisiting this recording to rewatch so many of what the panelists said, because all of it was so incredible. And I feel like there was so much to capture in just, even just these little summations. So thank you so much for all of our panelists. And thank you to our interpreters who've been holding it down for us for the past hour. I just remembered in the beginning, I forgot to mention that we still have our graphic recorder, Elena Starrett, for this session and for the next session as well. So we'll show you in a bit what Elena worked on last time and what was contributed today. But I just want to remind folks watching that we do have some time for Q&A. So if there's any questions you'd like, we invite you to use the Q&A function. If there's any questions you have more specifically, like just broadly to the panelists, or if there's a particular panelist you'd like to direct a question to, we invite you to do that, because we do have a little bit of time left still. But I think in the meantime, I might ask a general question to all of our panelists on some of the successful just transitions within Indigenous communities or their communities, other communities that might serve as models. If there's anyone who would like to take that on. Otherwise, I might direct that to Serena to talk about some examples that she's seen of successful just transitions.
Oh my gosh.
Serena, there's also a question for you in the chat I'm seeing.
Oh. What does a land back mean to you, and how can we implement that across Turtle Island? Yeah, I can answer that one, and we can talk about projects too. Land back to me, I feel like that's a loaded question. But land back to me basically means that I can be Haudenosaunee, that the coming faces can be Haudenosaunee, that we are able to continue who we are and carry our ancestral knowledge forward for the coming faces. And so just in context and how can we implement it? And honestly, I'm gonna be straight up, you can implement it in so many different ways. For me, I'm a frontline girly. Like, if we need to throw down, I will throw the heck down and say, like, this isn't happening. Been in blockades, actually, like, physically put your body on the front line. And I'm not saying that's everyone's role, but I am saying that that is a huge role. And that is the one time I really felt like we were autonomous and we were able to make a difference and say no. And man, land back to me basically is what I've always been told and what I've seen even growing up, living in Six Nations, and Carol can probably speak to that as well. Around 2006, I was 8 years old. We had Gunestado. It was a land conflict with the Douglas Creek estates were coming into our territory to create like illegal mass housing development and encroach. And in Six Nations, we literally only have 5% left of our remaining territory. And so we had to, and it's literally right on the cusp of the res. And our people, our clan mothers, our chiefs, like our people came and stopped that. My own family was there. And to this day, it still impacts my family and our community, but it also it also created the protected place, which is what Gonosado means. And it's a very special place for us in Six Nations. And it's always that reminder of like what can happen when your community comes together and we really uphold our traditional ways of knowing and governance, to embody our relationship as Haudenosaunee, our relationship to the land and to the waters and to our territories. And so for me, land back is so that we can continue being Haudenosaunee. And it's really specific because we can only be Haudenosaunee where there's maple trees, where there's strawberries, where we can grow corn, where we can grow beans, right? So we need to make sure that within like the Carolinian ecosystems that have always housed Haudenosaunee, we've always held relationship to, that we are still able to be governed by the land. Because honestly, we don't govern the land governs us. And you would know that if you came to ceremonies or you came to Six Nations and saw how intimately the seasons and our harvest influence who we are. And so for me, land back means that we're able to continue doing that. We're able to continue growing corn. And Michael Hill mentioned this from our community as a seed keeper of like, we only have 60 harvests left. And so that means like what are we gonna do when we aren't able to plant, because that's everything to who we are as Haudenosaunee people. And so when land back means is that we're able to be in relationship and continue that relationship with the land that we always have had, especially through our like agricultural practices. And just how to implement it lastly would be, it's going to look really different, because I think the just transition work I do, this projects, the solar projects, me doing it with the longhouse, that's land back to me. That is me seeing proactive development for one of the first times in my community that has been governed by our people, to show we are self-sufficient and we can hold and foster these lands and be in relationship, without any external forces coming in, to manage. Because that was something, even I'm in Nevada right now, and someone said a lot of the time, why they don't think Indigenous people should have the land is because they think they can manage it better than us. And I just think we wouldn't be in this mess if we were managing it. This would, and exactly like what Niskamata was saying, it's just, I just think managing and coexisting and being in relation with the land, and that can be, and all of us are doing what I think is land back work, um, on different contexts. And that might not be the front lines, but in Six Nations, 1492 Land Back Lane, Protect the Track, where I work really closely and do a lot of that frontline work, as well as supporting governance. But it can also be planting your garden. It can also be fishing and hunting and all of these different practices that make us who we are. That is land back to me, and that's how you can implement it.
Thank you so much, Sharina. I loved all of that, all of those points. And I think land back can often be I think this was something that was asked in the last webinar as well, is land back can seem a little bit frightening for people. But I think, again, we know that that term is all encompassing, and it is, again, getting back in touch with our responsibilities, going back to our life ways and our practices. And I think in ways that also I interpret it as being very literal, that we do need our land back, and our land needs us back as well. It needs to be in relationship with us again. And we can see how the land is suffering without us in relationship to it. And it's all encompassing and can be very specific and very literal too. But I do see a question in the Q&A that I think is really important to address when we're talking about renewable energy. And the question is, with many renewable energy projects requiring materials sourced from Indigenous lands, like lithium and copper for batteries, how can we prioritize Indigenous-led decision-making in these resource extractions to prevent further environmental harm and cultural disruption? And I think that's a really, really important question when we're talking about these. And on a nerdy point, and a little bit of organizational promotion, this is something that we talk about in the Just Transition Guide, in page 97 to 99. It talks about some of the considerations on this. And I would say it's also important, we know that an energy transition will include mining, and that I think something that at Indigenous Climate Action we stress, and I'm sure that a lot of our other organizations on this panel agree with, is that Indigenous people when these projects are coming in, we need to be maintaining our right to free, prior, and informed consent. And this is something to have a specific consideration on. And I'm wondering if any of our panelists would like to chime in on this, because I think this is a really important question on how can we reduce harm in these projects for critical minerals needed for renewables.
Yeah, I can jump in here. It's definitely a great question. And I think the thing that I always say in the energy space is that, we're not the solution. It's just part of the solution of ways in which we can, shift as a society to a more sustainable way of living. And it's definitely not a perfect or foolproof method by any means. And it still causes disparities and equity gaps and everything in this space when it comes to that side of developing projects. What I can say is that in this space, and especially, at Indigenous Clean Energy and with a lot of the youth that we work at with, is that what we're also trying to do while shifting to renewable energy is we're also trying to lower our energy use. And for us, that's just as important as it is shifting to renewable energy. And that's because, we see in so many of our teachings to take only what we need. And what we're seeing is that we need behavioral shifts in the world. We need us to change as a society, as people, and use only what we need and take only what we need. Because right now we're at a point where, we're supposed to share what's on the land. And when we take away from our other living relatives, we take away from Mother Earth, we take from the waters. And so that's why we emphasize, energy efficiency. That's why we emphasize behavioral shifts. That's why we emphasize going back to our teachings and going back to reconnect to the land so that we're living in a more harmonious way. Because by no means is, the extraction of these critical minerals benefiting our communities either. So we are working on that in a way that, this is always going to be part of the transition, but for us, a even bigger part of it, if not, is going to be utilizing less energy, because we always say it's way less expensive and it's way less extractive and hard on our communities to save a megawatt than it is to produce a megawatt. And so I just really want to point that out, that the just transition is not just about producing clean energy, it's about utilizing less energy and doing that in a way that meets the needs of all of our communities still.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aubrey. I think that's such an excellent point, is before we even talk about, creating new technologies, how do we make what we have, more energy efficient? And I'm not, as well versed on energy efficiency as some of the people on this panel, but that is, as I've always understood it, is the first piece, is energy efficiency before we even talk about newer technologies. And I think your point as well that there are flaws with clean energy, with renewable energy. I think of it as a patchwork solution, and there's many different solutions. And we'll talk about the policy end of things next week as well. But I'm also going to link an article in the chat that states that our current fossil fuel economy actually requires 535 times more mining per year than a renewable energy economy would. So there is, those harms are already being felt. And again, in this transition, it's really important to be upholding our rights to free, prior, and informed consent. So just being mindful of time, I'm wondering if we can get to one more question in the chat and before we get to see our beautiful graphic recording. Are there any questions that our panelists see that they would really like to answer? I'm seeing a question on ways for non-Indigenous communities to show up and support. A question on some of the data and band office issues, which I think would be a whole panel discussion. As well as there's a question on the differences between small scale and large scale renewable energy projects and how this connects with land back and resurgence. Yeah, I'm wondering, Nuskamata or Serena?
I want to just say something small to the last question, then I want to pass it to Nuskamata so she can have the floor for. Just what little small thing around the minerals, know your supply chain. That is a huge thing to really, when you are starting to say use batteries, use solar panels, understand from extraction to processing to distribution, understand all the different steps within it and where it's actually coming from and where it's rooted in, because that's a really big thing I don't think people communicate when we're doing projects, is around the supply chain. So yeah, that would just be my one tip too, of like how can we avoid and still be careful of ESG metrics that people are using, because we're not the ones defining those metrics, it's other people. So just be careful on that. But yeah, that's the only thing I want to say about minerals, because it's the talk of the town, and this is what we need to really focus on with the transition. But I'm going to pass it to my fellow wonderful panelists to answer.
Yeah, Nuskmata, I'm wondering if there's anything you would like to touch on with regards to minerals or any of these other questions in the chat.
Yeah, like all of this is really connected, right? So when you're talking about reducing your consumption, that's a really, really big piece. Like even being aware of, you know, the kind of false narratives around recycling. It's like use less. Like when you're thinking about, it's really difficult to buy like at the grocery store, for example, to buy things that aren't heavily packaged. That's why it's so important to like support your farmers markets or grow your own food or be connected, because when you're out there, you are actually taking note of what's happening on the land. And that connection and that love story that you have with your own lands is very important, because you will protect what you love. And if you don't know anything about what's going on, it's a really good call for you to start getting involved and start showing up. So this is like, whether you're Indigenous or not, start showing up and start putting in time to educate and make small changes and shifts. And it's really important for people to share this with their friends and their family, and to do it in ways that you're leading by example. What we're doing in our village of rebuilding, we've used all locally sourced wood. So we're really wealthy in forests here, and the wood that we've used is already down on the ground, or it's something that's harvested locally that we had to clear anyway. So we're not using clear cut lumber that's coming from who knows where. Some stuff we had to purchase, but we're investing in long-term, really durable materials so that we're not having to replace it every few years. So thinking of like building for a future that will have weather extremes. We're building higher off the ground with heavier materials, and we're insulating at a much heavier rate so that it's for the heat and the cold. We've used metal roofs, and I've worked in advocacy for mining for over a decade, and I know the impacts. Mount Poly mine disaster happened in my homelands, in at Quesnel Lake, Yuchnis and Kamekwa, right? So when we're thinking about solar panels, we're like, well, I think where we live, we have a lot of water, so we're going to use something that's a passive energy system and invest in something that's of high quality upfront. It's a lot of upfront cost, but it's an investment, right? And we're looking at how we can reuse things all the time and, use the ingenuity of our ancestors. They built really complex weir systems. So we're looking at reverse engineering that, looking in diagrams, looking in museums, and like, let's start moving back towards that and working with the tide and being in synchronicity with the world around us, so that we're not trying to fight it and oppress it, which is a colonial system of extraction for immediate profit. We're thinking more long-term. All of those things add up. And I think sharing our examples is really important, sharing that work out, inviting people in to come and witness, going out and witnessing other people's work and sharing those stories, being good witnesses, validating other people's work. This is all part of our traditional governance systems, learning about what is your traditional governance system, because that system never crashed the earth. Our Indigenous governance systems held our lands in health and intact, and our families, and kept us fed. And, the laws that we have are about equity, about protection of the land, and living as a good citizen where we are with all of life, with all of creation. So working those into your daily life, I think, are really important to understand, and know that you have the power to do that, Don't believe this colonial oppressive language around you're powerless. You know, I always tell people if we were truly powerless, corporations and the government wouldn't spend so much money trying to convince us that we were powerless. So, you know, the power that you have within your own life is a lot. You have a lot of power to influence others, to shift your own life, to shift your experience, and to create a new normal for everybody younger than you and even those older than you. I stopped my dad from throwing garbage out his truck window. It was a small win, but it started to this thinking systems change process that, you know, those baby steps and those seeds will translate down the road. So don't underestimate your own power to make a change and to share your story and use your voice and get out there in the real world, please. Don't stay inside all day. Don't stay in an office all day. Don't be in a boardroom all day. Get out there and let the land heal you and strengthen you and calm you and ground you and learn about your ceremonies and use your language every day. Stud needs.
I'm just like so fired up after that. Thank you so much, Nuskamata. And thank you so much to all of our panelists. I'm personally feeling very inspired and fired up by all of your contributions here today. And especially that point, Nuskamata, on just like the power of our people. We know that we are power, and that lays in our culture and our languages and in our lands. And so I think that we're right on time. So I'm just thank you to our panelists for maintaining adherence to our schedule. And I think we're going to do some closing remarks next. So we're closing in on our time here. So just I'll pass off to Aubrey first, just to talk, if you'd like, just kind of any remarks you have on clean energy projects, including young people, supporting those who've been most marginalized, and then we'll pass on. But Aubrey?
Yeah, I would say I'm very thankful to have been able to be on this panel alongside two very, very brilliant people in the space. And also just to point out that, there's so much knowledge shared here today. And so if you can see that between the 4 or 5 people who have spoken, imagine like what you could see if you walk into a space or a room full of Indigenous energy champions and, saw the work and the lived experiences that they had. And just to know that, I kept saying today about how like Indigenous folks are humble and they often won't share about themselves. And I think like a good pointer to like non-Indigenous folks is to remember, if you're wanting to be a contributor in this space, is for yourself to humble up, like be okay to step down, be okay to step away, be okay to let Indigenous people lead you and show you where to go and show you our ways and our teachings. And that's really where you're going to derive like the most meaning and impact from and learn so much from. Because I always used to joke with my mom back in the day. I'd be like, man, I'm scared to go to the round dance next week because I just know I'm going to get yelled at by a few elders for mixing things up. And my mom would always say, it's an honor and it's a privilege, when an elder is doing that, because it's not them getting mad at you and it's not them being disappointed in you. It's them showing that they care about you enough and care about your participation in the space to teach you and to show you the right way to do it, so that we're passing on that knowledge in a good way and so that it's maintained. And that's the same in the just transition. Is it's okay to be told that you're wrong, and it's okay to take a step down and allow other people to lead you, because that's where we're gonna learn and do the most. And for Indigenous youth, just know that every part of the just transition needs you. It like I said, it doesn't have to be in the technical side, it's in the communication side, it's in the cultural side, it's in every part of it. And that you'll have a space here once you find your community, and whether you find that with Sacred Earth Solar, Indigenous Climate Action, Indigenous Clean Energy, or within your community or wherever, that work is meaningful. Whether it's a large scale or a small scale project, everything has a purpose in this space, and it's going to get us to the point that we need to get to as a community. But yeah, just thank you so much.
Thank you again, Aubrey, for your contributions and all of your work. I'm going to pass over to Nuskamata for some closing remarks, even though I feel like you've already given us many, many amazing remarks, but thanks, I'll pass off.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me and creating the space for these conversations to happen. I think it's very important to keep seeing these things. More people are showing up all the time, educating, and really encourage people to just share what they've learned and to be teachable, to not worry so much about your ego, but about doing the right thing. And something was shared with me earlier, is that we have these ancient these ancient systems for this new work. And it's important to remember that we are all here for a reason, and that it's no coincidence that we're doing this work together, even if we're not in each other's immediate space. We're connected here in a powerful way that can be shared, and it's important to share the work because it invites more people in. So just keep up the great work, and I encourage you, and know that we're in solidarity here in Nucleacalimp. Way.
Thank you so much for that. And last but not least, I'm gonna pass off to my sister Serena for some closing remarks.
Yeah, Nyawagoa to everyone for coming from Sacred Earth Solar, to be able to talk and represent this organization's been really special. Nyawagoa to our partners, Indigenous Climate Action, doing the good work. And Nyawagoa to my fellow panelists. I don't know if I can swear, but y'all are badass. And this is like super exciting that I even get to be alive at the same time as all of these other people who are doing this amazing work. And I think that's where I want to end off, is for me and for just transition and for finding our pathways to how we used to live before. And it comes back to community, kinship, collective. And I was saying this the other day, I was like, I don't really have climate anxiety. Like, I'm not really scared. And they were like, why? I was like, I got my people, got my animals, I got the land. And I was like, and that's all I need. And it holds me and it takes care of me. Even yesterday I was kayaking, it was pretty wavy out, and I didn't tip, and the water was graceful with me and forgiving, and I acknowledged that, and it's really just such a gift. This life is such a gift, and so to be able to share that with others and to share that with your community and kin is what we need to be able to get to the next level, to really push forward the worlds we want to see. And so I just think, like, how many people talk to their neighbors, right? How many people are actually building those quality relationships around them? And then we're supposed to make these like dire decisions with the climate crisis when we don't even have basic relationship skills. So I just think for a just transition and for your own well-being and healing and health, come together, go for tea with your auntie, go to ceremony. It might be nerve-wracking. Start exactly what Nuskamata, like, speak the language. My brother just started language immersion this week. All of these different things that are bringing us together to our true selves, and really bringing those communities forward, because we need each other in this time, and that's the only way we're going to actually make a just shared future, is if we have the collective behind us. And so yeah, I'm really grateful because I find like everyone here is my kin, my relatives, my community, and it gives me the courage and the excitement as a young Indigenous woman, a young Haudenosaunee woman, to be able to push forward these solutions. And I wouldn't be able to do it without all of these amazing people who surround me and hold me and uplift me. And so be sure to do that for others, and be sure to enact that kind of level of care and love, because that's what this work is all about, is wanting to embody care and love back within to our communities. So yeah, I'll go and thank you.
Thank you so much, Serena. I'm feeling completely inspired and fired up after this panel. It just turned my whole day around. So thanks to everybody. So that's just about our time. We have a few more minutes for some key points. I'm going to pass off to Elena to show the progress on the graphic recording for today.
Hi everyone. My name is Alina Starrett, and I am zooming into you from Kamloops or Tecumseh, but I am from the Gitxsan Nation, so up from Hazelton, BC. So this is the progress on the graphic recording, so that you guys know a little bit of my process. Obviously, trying to write notes and such in an hour and a half is not a lot of time, so I will be taking this back to clean it up, and make sure that it's got everything, because the panelists today were insane. Honestly, you guys kind of made my job hard because there was so much good stuff that I don't even know, like, I don't even know how to fit it all in there, but I'm going to do it because it was amazing. So I have lots of notes as well to add into this, and I'll also show you guys last week's. But at the beginning, we kind of started with our Indigenous youth leadership, and that the space is for everyone. Oh, is it Sharon? Oh, okay, is it Sharon? We talked about imagination and the fact that we're doing this for our people. We need to make sure that there's Indigenous decision making and that this is exciting and accessible. We're also we're imagining a world with community and healing and self-determination. Up at the top above capacity building, I'm representing the youth learning about the fish. And the fact that we need to be hands-on in our community in order to learn, and that these are the intergenerational conversations that we're having. And then we also have responsibilities. This also needs to have my land in it, but responsibilities to our communities, our families, our ancestors, our future generations, and myself. There's respect is a really big thing, and we need to respect and protect the land. Indigenous people are resilient, and we have humility, and then we are also self-sufficient. And then I'll just go over like a couple of the notes just so you guys know where I'm going with it. So I have going back to our teaching, our land needs us back, reconciliation. I'm an expression of this land, community care, love, and healing. So all those kind of things I'm going forward with, and tons of notes. And then I will show you guys the last one as well, just so that you guys can see a more clean version. So this is what we did last Thursday. So yeah, this is a bit more of a cleaner version. So yes, thank you so much to everyone for allowing me to witness and listen. I know we talked a lot about witnessing at the end there, and I feel like that's a major part of what my role is starting this business and being a graphic recorder, is I am a witness to your guys' work and your stories. And I'm trying to tell your stories in a respectful way. So I really appreciate everyone for being so open and honest and allowing me to witness it, because it is an honor to hear what you all are doing. So thank you so much. Hamaya, Toxnism, my heart thanks your heart. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here next week as well.
Thanks so much, Elena. I'm always convinced that graphic recording is magic, and the fact that you're able to do that in an hour and a half always just blows my mind. So that is our panel for today. Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you again to our interpreters, Kat and Hercules, for sharing their time with us. And Elena, again, for that graphic recording. I'm so excited to see the final piece after next week's panel. So again, just as a little reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the coming days. I will definitely be revisiting some of these moments because I feel like there was just so many amazing things shared that I want to go back and revisit. And for next week, we have the third part of our panel on policy. It'll be at the same time. And our panelists for that, the final piece of our webinar are our executive director here at Indigenous Climate Action, Ariel Deranger, Clayton Thomas Mueller, Ace Harry, and Freddie Campbell, and will be moderated by the lovely Santana Drever from Sacred Earth Solar. And there will be a follow-up survey for this webinar as well. We really appreciate everybody's feedback. It really helps us improve, and this is our first time offering this series, so the feedback is really appreciated. And again, just thank you again to our panelists. This was incredible contributions, and I think it's always incredible to see the way that our women and our femmes are really leading the way. So thank you, Nyawagoa again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday. Bye.